Hello, friends. Hello. Welcome to Craft Your Joy Live. I'm Lisa Hetrick. We are going to have some fun today. I'm really excited for today's tutorial. We are going to talk about watercolor techniques, some watercolor effects using stencils or a stencil. This was something that came up in the comments, I think like 2 weeks ago on a live that we did together. It was something that there was interest in, so I decided to share that today. And we are going to do a card project using my newest stamp set with Gina K Designs called The Greatest Gift. And I actually have two techniques that we're going to do today in this project. And this is my theme for this year. We're going to pause, slow things down a little bit. And this is why. Often I come to our tutorials with a lot of energy and I have all of these different ideas and I'm nerding out and I want to teach you this technique and this technique and this technique. And I realized that feels kind of overwhelming to come to a tutorial where we are trying to jam as many techniques into one tutorial as possible. And instead, I want to slow things down this year in our tutorials, break things down even more than I've already done in past tutorials, and focus a little bit slower. And instead of me coming in, because yesterday I had pulled like 6 different Gina K stencils and we were going to do techniques with all of them. And instead, I just want to pause and let's do one, right? Let's do one. Okay, friends. So that was my little setting of our intention today, and an intention for all of the techniques I plan on sharing in tutorials into the future. Just kind of slow things down a little bit. I want to thank you for your time with me. I want to be intentional with my time with you and really just kind of go deeper into the technique, but without all the stuff. If that makes sense, let me know in the comments. And I see people popping in. We're going to do a quick hello, and then we're going to get started. Hey, Rhonda, Judith, Gloria, Terry. Hey, it's my cousin Terry. Hello, Mary, Barbara. Hey, Barbara. Barbara and I were chatting earlier in the Craft Your Joy Lab, which is my free community. Barbara, I really messed up the event in there today. I kept getting the time wrong, so I'm glad to see you here. Hi, Dan. Hi, Dawn. Oh, dealing with insurance. Don't even get me started with insurance companies. Dawn's dealing with a few things today, and shared that it's a great idea. Thank you, Terry. Great idea. I want to really. Here's what I think before we get going. Back on my intention of pausing, slowing things down a little bit. There is a lot coming at us, friends. I feel like if I can feel it, I'm sure that all of you are feeling it. There's a lot of information coming at us at different times about life, about all the things going on in the world. There's a lot of different things coming on in social media. I want to use our time together differently. I want to slow things down a little bit. And I really, really want to take the time with you to go a little bit deeper into our techniques with less stuff and make it more meaningful for us. And in turn, I feel like you and I both will absorb more and we will be able to craft our joy, find that through line, finding your joy just through this process. I don't want to come on here live and be like, do this, do this, do this, and grab this and grab this and grab this. I don't want to create more hurried energy. I want to create more thoughtful time together. I hope that makes sense. And I hope that it resonates with you. I'm kind of going back. Cheryl just shared that it made sense to her. Hi, Heidi. Welcome back. Haven't seen you in a while. Gloria just shared. Gloria, so true. We need to apply our philosophy to our lives. I kind of, honestly, Gloria, that's where these intentions have been coming from. I've spent a lot of time here in January where most people have hurried New Year's energy. I've been thinking, how can we slow things down, make things more meaningful, and just kind of drop into that space a little bit more. Um, ah, Terry, you agree? Yes. There is a lot coming at us, and it's going to continue to come at us. And there's a lot of frenetic energy that you can get wrapped up in people's opinions, lots of things that people have to say. I don't want this space to be like that. I want this space to be very, very intentional and focused on what we can create. And let's just kind of drop into that space together. Okay, let's go ahead. I feel like I kind of spent a lot of time talking about that. So let's go ahead and drop into what we're doing today. So today we are going to talk about, here's my inspiration. Let's start with the inspiration. So this was a card that I did for the release for my newest stamp set called The Greatest Gift. And then this was a card this was another version of it that I did just kind of experimenting a little bit with some stencils and some watercolor techniques. Now, on this channel, I have done a tutorial. Thank you, Heidi. I've done a tutorial that's listed down below in the description that is that tutorial that grabbed like 6 or 7 different stencils and did 5 or 6 different washy watercolor techniques. And I was like, do I come in today and just kind of repeat that thought? Now, I was like, I started to, and I'd be like, let's rehash this. Let's repeat this thought. Let's come in with these 6 different stencils. And I was like, no, we're going to come into it today with, we are going to do a watercolor technique with stencils, and we're going to approach it with one particular way. And then we can expand on that over time, because one way gives you time to pull what's in your stash and then practice the technique before you're trying to do 6 more things, right? There's that level of feeling like, oh my gosh, she just showed me 6 things. I got to try to do all 6 things. No, I'm going to show you 1 or 2 things today. And then you're going to practice those 2 things or try them if you want to and see how it feels. Okay, that's what we're going to do. Okay. Oh, everybody's saying you're a great teacher and listener. Good. Then this is resonating. I kind of felt like I'm a highly intuitive person. I get these hits and these intuition hits. And I was kind of, if I'm feeling it, I was kind of feeling this energy that everyone else is starting to feel as well, like overwhelmed, right? So thank you, TJ. She said, you're calm. Oh, you calm my worries. That's so sweet. Hello, Tammy. Gloria said my favorite stencil. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the stencil. Okay. TJ just said, I've learned so much. I've had the courage to send watercolor cards this year. Oh, that's so sweet. Hi, my Aunt Joyce just popped in. Hello. Love you too, Aunt Joyce. Hello. Okay, all of the supplies that we're using today are listed down below in the description, and you'll see me and I'll talk about them as we go along. Okay, we are using my stamp set with my newest stamp set with Gina K called The Greatest Gift. We're going to be using this heart. We're going to be using the coordinating die for that heart. And we're going to be using these 3 hearts and this sentiment. So you can see I'm not, last week we used this big honkin' piece, right? This week, we're just going to slow it down a little bit. Okay. And we're going to use this stencil. Let's find a piece of paper that I can put this up against. Oh, Cheryl just says a retired teacher is a great way to approach teaching. Thank you. Oh, that's not really working. Let me just do the stencil here. We're going to use this stencil today. This is a Gina K stencil, and it's called Harvest Flourish. And I think it's sold out right now. I'm not sure, but it was in my stash, and I really liked the flourishes. But the reason why I picked this is because this stencil is extremely intricate. And in general, I have trouble with extremely intricate stencils because look, they like have a lot of pieces and bits and parts that it's very easy for your watercolor to kind of get underneath it, or your ink if you're doing blending. But I wanted to show you this technique today that will kind of remove that fear. Okay, because I have that fear, and it's predominantly why I don't do a lot of ink blending on stencils, because I'm stencil challenged and I booger things up. Now, one of the things with watercolor and using watercolor with stencils is watercolor is what? Like super washy, right? Super washy, super watercolory, and the color, the water wants to run, right? So it's going to easily run under the stencils and make a big blob, right? Feels like it will. Feels kind of counterintuitive, and it will. But today, the technique that we're going to do and the technique I'm going to share, one technique to simplify this, we're going to get washy watercolor looks without the stress of that running ink, that running watercolor underneath the stencil, making kind of like a big blobby mess. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And then I'm going to show a second technique as well. We are going to make a piece of patterned paper that may or may not look similar to this, and we're going to use watercolor set. Now, you could do this technique with your inks, but again, I would recommend you using either like the Gina K inks or water-based ink. But today, I'm using watercolor in a pan. So here's my watercolor set. Okay, and this is just, you've seen this set before. We're going to keep it really simple. This is a set of Winsor Newton watercolor. And I'm going to bring in, let me get a piece of paper. I've got Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor. And this is 100% watercolor paper. I've used this, I use this every week on the channel. And this is what we're using today because it is 100% cotton. It is washy. It's going to take on that water. It's going to take that water and it's going to ask for more. And it's just, it works. It works for my paper crafting project. So I'm taking a look. One of my favorite stencils. Darlene is here from Brunswick, Canada. Hello, Darlene. Ah, Heidi, my biggest fear with trying watercolor on. What's your biggest fear, Heidi? With trying watercolor on with stencils? Maybe because it's washy and it'll run under the stencil. I totally get you. All right, I'm going to take some tape and I'm going to tape down my watercolor paper. And the only reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want it to like kind of run across. And then I'm going to tape down my stencil. Now, stencils, I love stencils. And I had a little hint last week that I was creating some stencils that may or may not coordinate with some of my new stamps in the new year. That is a goal. But stencils can be like challenging. And I am not like the blending queen, right? I'm heavy-handed. So I tend to like any kind of tutorial I've done on this channel where I've done ink blending. It always kind of looks a little bit like a hot mess or like a watercolory mess. So I was like, well, wait a minute. Let's find a way to use, Heidi said, using your stencils with watercolor. Agreed. And that's why we're doing this today. Let's find a way that I can use my watercolor and I can use my stencil. And I know that I've done a tutorial on this on the channel, and I did link that down below so you could take a peek. But today we're going to focus on a technique with a watercolor, your stencil, that's a little more controlled, doesn't feel out of control when you're doing it, and can be super washy and give you this watercolor washy effect for your background. This could be a background for your card, but today we're going to use it to die cut. Okay, did I set that up enough, right? Some people say that pixie spray helps it not to run, but you can't use it. Okay, so pixie spray is that spray that you spray on the back of your stencil and it makes it stick, and it's sort of like won't, like, you'll still be able to remove it. It's like a removable tape. I don't like pixie spray either because I don't like the sticky residue. I mean, I like to use it, but I also don't like to spray things in enclosed areas. So I don't use them on my stencils. I just tape them down. Okay, so now what we're going to do, did I bring it over? Yeah, here we go. What we're going to do is I've got my watercolor set here. And what I'm going to do is just wet my watercolor set. I've got some water. And I'm just going to get my watercolors activated. Okay? So here's the key. I'm activating the watercolors. I'm just going to do a little spritz of my paper. But you see how far up I was spritzing the paper? Not really. You could get away with not doing that. And then I'm going to, my brush is dry, paper's a little wet, stencil is sitting on top, kind of acting as my mask. Then I'm going to dip my brush into my watercolor, okay? So this is going to get us, I've got two different brushes here, and basically my brushes are, this is a tiny one, and this is just a little bit bigger. So they look like, actually, I think I took this craft brush and I clipped it and I took some of the, and made it blunt. So that's what you're looking for. You're just looking for a brush that's kind of blunt. Or if you're going to use a round brush, you're going to do the same. And then what I've gotten is like 100% milk texture of my watercolor here. My brush is not wet. The pigment is there. And then I'm just going to just start pushing it in to the stencil area. Okay, I'm going to go with a little bit of a bigger brush and just kind of dip it in there because I want to cover a bigger space. You can see how I'm just kind of dipping it in there. So anybody, ooh, look at that. I got a little bit of purple on there too. But I got a lot of color in there. So what we're doing essentially with our watercolor is what a lot of people do with their acrylic paints. When they're actually using stencils with acrylic paint and kind of doing it on the walls, right? Or a project, that little stippling, you're stippling in your watercolor. That's it, Barbara. Your red brush is called a deerfoot brush. You're right. A couple weeks ago, and it says it right here. Look, deerfoot brush. It is a deerfoot brush. It's like a little blunt brush. I do love it. I love my deerfoot brush. Now, what's happening is there's a little bit of water going on here. It's got some water. There is some water that might be running underneath this detail in the stamp, but not a lot, okay? Because I'm dabbing off my brush. My brush is wet, but not super, super wet. And then let's just dip this into my paint, in my yellow. And you can see all that yellow there. And let's just keep applying it. And I'm going to let it mix. And I'm just going around just like I would if I was using acrylic paint and stenciling it in, like stenciling a wall. Remember when that was a big thing? Yes, pouncing. Cheryl, thanks for the word. I couldn't come up with it. This looks like pouncing we used to do for stenciling. It's exactly that. Pouncing that you did for stenciling. Except the key with doing it for watercolor is activating your watercolor instead of having your brush be wet. You're just activating your watercolors and using them that way. Okay, I'm going to grab some of that water and that beautiful pigment, add a little bit of yellow, clean off my brush a little bit. Not as super concerned about cleaning off my brush, and just kind of letting you know what I've got here cleaning off my brush. I'll just have a little reusable towel. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit of this alizarin crimson and just kind of come in and pounce this on. So the reason why I like this technique, and thank you, Cheryl, for giving me the pounce word, because my brain wasn't coming up with the word, which happens sometimes. My brain not giving me the word that I want. Anybody else have that issue? Okay, I'm pouncing this in, and it feels kind of intense. And what I really like about this is that we really don't know what it looks like underneath. But how beautiful! Look how beautiful that is, right? Look how stunningly beautiful that color is. I'm just kind of drying some things off as we go here, because dropped my card. Because I want to keep things a little bit dry. I'm going to lift this up so it's not super wet. Now remember, I misted the paper just a little bit, right? Just a little bit. I'm going to get my hand underneath here and I'm going to pull that out. So we've got, look at that. I love that. And here's some here's another thing that you can, I'm going to leave that on there. We pull that stencil over there. Okay, so we've got, I'm going to pull this off. You can see that we have this watercolor look, and it's not super washy yet. We did see you get a little bit of running, right? I love all the things that people are saying, that you're all saying about words and losing words. Yeah, that's me. And I think it's because my brain gets like 10 steps ahead of myself, that nerding out part, that sometimes I'm like thinking about like the 10 steps ahead. Again, let's slow our minds and stay here. Be intentional about where we are. Okay, loving this. Now what I'm going to do is just mist this just a little bit, because it is watercolor, right? We want it to kind of be washy. I call this like that controlled washy look. We've got a little bit of movement going here. I could make it move more if I want and get that little smoosh. Let's make it move a little bit more right there and get it to be kind of smooshy. Now, coming back to all of my friends here in the chat that have been concerned and worried about watercolor, right? Or feeling like a little bit overwhelmed with some of the watercolor techniques, and them feeling, because watercolor is wild and woolly, right? But remember, watercolor only goes where the water is. Remember, I pounced on all that watercolor. It had a little bit of water, but a whole lot of pigment. But you can tell that it was still watercolor, and it had that watercolor effect. Watercolor only wants to move where the water is. So when I added water, look, then it started to move. So once you keep that mindset, you're able to kind of understand how watercolor works, and then you're able to control it a little bit, or feel like you have a little bit more control over it. I just want to kind of pop in because I hear the chat. Yeah, okay, she said she was gonna take the stencil. Cheryl said that she was gonna take the stencil and smoosh it on another piece of paper. And actually, Cheryl, that's kind of where I was headed in my first thought. Like, I was just gonna like take a little bit of water. Let's go ahead and move this to the side since you mentioned that, and then like smoosh it down and see what happens, right? You could smoosh it down and see if you got a little bit of that color. I didn't. It got it, probably because I didn't get this super wet. I'm just kind of leaving that. Look at that, how pretty that is. Anyway, but you could do that. I didn't get it wet enough to make that happen. So let's go ahead and kind of wipe this up so that we can dry it and take a look at where we are. So look at this. This is so pretty. We've got this washy watercolor look, but it was really, really super simple to do. And we just pounced our color on. If you don't have watercolors in pans that you want, or paint that you can use to do this technique, you can do this technique with your inks. You would do the same thing. You would pounce it on, and then you're going to like immediately wet it though to get it to move. Remember, watercolor, even though when it dries and it's dry, we're pouncing it on pretty 100% like milk, right? Really thick. We were pouncing it on. And watercolor will reactivate as soon as water hits it. Inks will reactivate, but you have to work a little bit faster. Gina K inks, you have to work a little bit faster. Distress inks, you have 30 seconds before it starts to dry on watercolor paper, so that you can hit it with water. So, I'm kind of excited. Everybody's saying, Tammy just said she was going to try it today. Try the technique today. Let's see if I missed anything else. Yes, TJ, yes, you can take that stencil and make another imprint. So everybody was saying that. Oh, Dawn, I'm going to answer that question as soon as we dry this. I want to dry this because we're going to move on and do our die cutting. A little bit of that fiber from the brush. Okay. Now, Dawn's question was, could you use reinkers? Yes, you could absolutely use reinkers. But remember, reinkers are going to be wet. Okay, so if I took reinkers and I put them down onto my surface, I'm going to get a puddle of color. So make sure your brush is really super dry. Dip it in that puddle, maybe dab it off once, and then start to go in a little bit. And you're going to have to work a little bit quicker. But because we were working with these watercolors in the pans, remember they were dry. I activated them with water, and we were able to kind of get them, the cakes, to move because we had that color at 100% milk consistency onto the brush. Okay, now we've got this washy watercolor look. I'm kind of loving this, loving the way this looks. So I really, really like the stencil. This Harvest Flourish stencil has a lot of detail in it, right? A lot of detail. So if I was trying to use that stencil with like a lot of water on my brush, it would seep underneath and we would start to lose some of our shape. But because we did this technique and then we added water by spritzing it on, I was able to get the color to move, give us that washy watercolor effect, but we really kind of controlled the environment in which we did it. Okay, so that's one technique to create washy watercolor effects with a stencil. It's the pouncing technique. I didn't invent it. People who've been doing stencils all along with like acrylic paint on the walls and all the different things, like techniques people were doing in the 90s, did it. I just decided, hey, let's try it with some watercolor. Okay, now we are going to die cut out some hearts in this pattern paper. So I'm going to cut this in half. I'm going to bring in my little baby die cutter, my little Gina K die cutter. I love it. I love it because I can bring it in here. I know it's kind of nerdy, but I love it because it's kind of low profile. I'm going to cut this in half because we're only probably going to use, I'm going to pick which half I'm going to use too. We're only going to use a little bit of this. We're going to cut. I'm really kind of honing in on loving the way that looks. Save this for another time. Okay, save this for another background. I need to make it, let's cut off this. I could have brought in my guillotine cutter, but it's over there. So let's go ahead. We're going to start cutting out some of our, I'm looking for my plates here. I've got my two plates, my little intricate mini. And I'm going to, let's bring this in the frame a little bit so that you can see. So the beautiful thing about this die cutter is that when I make the cut, I'm going to get two pieces. I'm going to get the inner and the outer piece. So I'm going to move this around. You can see I'm moving the heart around because I want to get the piece of the washy watercolor that I want to get. And I think, see the lines, see how the design looks? kind of loving how those two colors came together. So we're going to use that right there. That's what we're going to do. And you could use the rest of this and cut a bunch out while you're at it, right? I'm just going to cut this one. And this is kind of, I know that you all have heard me say this before, that the stamps and the stamps are the star of the show. What are all the different things that we can do to create embellishments for our cards without pulling in all the stuffs, right? All the stuffs that we need, or we perceive that we might need to make the card. That's why I like to use the stamps. Dawn just said, is anyone else experiencing ads in the middle? There are ads running in the middle of the live. I'm sorry about that, Dawn. I'll look into that. I don't have a lot of control over what YouTube does, but I think I have some controls of when I want ads to show up. So let me look into that. But thank you for telling me that. And TJ said it's on her phone, not her TV. So that makes me curious too. But I'll be able to dive into that a little bit more. I'm not really big on the ads showing up in the middle of a live. That's frustrating. So my apologies. But again, I don't have a ton of control over what YouTube does. Heidi just said a few ads on her phone. Thanks for letting me know this so I can dive into it a little bit deeper. Okay. All right. I have my cardstock base I'm going to use today is cherry red. And then I have another piece of watercolor paper cut out to be, I used a master layouts die. So this is 3.5 by 5. Yeah. To get that layer. Now I'm going to set these two aside. These are going to be our embellishments. I'm going to put them up over there by my face. But look at all this. We have more. Of the patterned paper that we created that we can use. Or you could use this with any kind of die cutter. Any kind of die cut that you want to use it with. So now I'm going to come in and we're going to do another technique that is compatible with this. But also I had shared this in social media. I shared this, I think I shared it in the Gina K group. And I shared this card. And I shared, hey, is anyone interested in like understanding how that watercolor works? Right? And I know that you all have seen me do this technique many times. But I'm going to do this technique again today. And we're going to use it with the stencil piece that we create, the stencil embellishment. So I'm going to start to work on the composition of the card. We're going to stamp out some hearts, 2 stamped hearts, and then we're going to use our 2 embellishments and keep this card like super simple. But I don't want the stamped heart to kind of come out and just be the outer shape of the heart. So I'm going to dip my brush. So my brush is wet, paper's dry, brush is super wet. I'm dipping my brush into permanent rose, and I think 2 or 3 videos ago we talked about permanent rose, and I'm just going to brush some of this watercolor onto this stamp. Boop, 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 boop. Cheryl, thank you. I don't have any control over what YouTube does, but I can look into it and see if I can make that not happen. See if there's some sort of setting or default. There's always some sort of setting that we can look into. All right, so here's my card base. I'm just going to go ahead and stamp this right here. And notice how I'm not putting any pressure. I'm just going to sit it right there. Tap it, lift it up. And now I've got my watercolor. Now, this technique is super fun. And here's why. Because I'm doing it with a stamp. And so what I'm doing is my brush is wet. The paper's dry, and look, I'm just activating the color that's here. And we're just painting with it. But you can do this technique, this exact technique that I'm doing right now, without stamps. You could do it with the bottom of a cup. if you wanted to practice painting some circles. You could use it with anything. Like at the bottom of this, I could just paint on it, stamp it down, and then just kind of use that shape to create a watercolor painting. But right now I'm using it with my stamp, and we're creating these really fun watercolor effects. Look at these colors. This color, this permanent rose. And we're doing wet into wet now. Brush is wet, paper's wet, and I'm just kind of moving my color around. And now we're bringing in that super washy watercolor with our stenciled watercolor embellishments. That's what we're going to do. And we're creating that. We're giving our card a lot of contrast. And it looks like a lot of watercolor painting going on and a lot of technique going on, but really super simple looks. I love this effect. So we've done this with the watercolor paint. I'm going to dry it. And what I want you to notice is we're using permanent rose, which is PV19, beautiful, brilliant rose color, one of my favorites in all brands. I'm going to come back to that, Cheryl, and we're going to dry it. Once I dry the watercolor, I want you to notice how vibrant it is now, but once I dry it, it's going to shift back a little bit. And that happens with every watercolor brand. Okay, I'm going to dry this up. I could let it dry in between, but we don't have that kind of time, so I'm going to go ahead and dry it. Dry it up. Sometimes I kind of turn it to the back. Love it. Okay. And we notice that shift back. It is still very vibrant, but it has shifted back a little bit. And watercolor will do that. That value that we've got here has shifted back. Now, to jack up that luminosity, I can come back in. Brush is wet, paper is dry. And I can add a little bit more color. And I'm intentionally just kind of adding it up here. And I've shared this technique many times before. It's called glazing, or just simply layering. Cleaning off my brush. And now I'm just going to kind of feather out this hard edge. Just kind of drag a little bit of that color over here so we don't have that hard edge. Clean off my brush. And just, I want to preserve this white that we've got going on over here. See that hard line right there? I'm just going to kind of just kind of blend it out a little bit. But look at how we've changed that. So that color shifted back. And then we added a little bit more color to that upper corner. So now we have this graduating contrast of look of colors from light to dark. Yeet. Love it. Okay. Dry it up. You can see how it's going to shift back again. We got a little bloom there too, which is cute. Blooming happens when water, like there's a little bit too much of a concentration of water, of pigment, and it pushes the ink, pushes the watercolor back, and you kind of get this little blooming effect. I love it. I love the blooming effect. Some people don't really like it because they feel like they really want smoothie watercolor. I feel like watercolor is wild and woolly and fun and flowy, and it's just kind of all part of it. So, okay, Cheryl says, okay, now I see what I've been doing wrong with painting on stamps. I've been pressing like you do with ink. Yes. So when I press down, remember how I just let it sit there and I went tap, tap, and just tapped it? So if you use watercolor paint and you paint your stamp, and you could do this with any stamp in your stash, doesn't necessarily have to be a line art, open line stamp. If you push like you do with ink, you're going to get that smooshing, right? And that paint is going to smoosh, and then you're going to lose like a little bit of your lines. Okay. TJ said now it's in 3D. Yes, exactly. So this image looks like it's in 3D, but it isn't. It's all on one plane. This is the beauty. This is just why I get so excited, because we are creating a lot of depth, dimension, and texture with just a few really small watercolor techniques. TJ just shared I got granulation the other day when practicing and you were overjoyed. That's fantastic. I know I've talked about granulating watercolors on the channel many times. Granulation is beautiful. Granulation, real quickly, is when the watercolor that you're working with, the pigment starts to separate from the water a little bit, and you get a little bit of this granulation. There's little granulating, little tiny dots, and it creates a whole lot of texture in your painting, in your work. Okay, now we've done this with watercolor. Now I want to come in and I want to show you, we're going to bring in our ink. And I'm going to stamp another heart down here with the Gina K ink, and I'm going to show you the differences between the time and the speed in which you need to work when you're working with this. You watched me I had some time to work with it. I'm moving the water around. Watercolor is reactive to water, so it reanimates when you add water to it. Inks can do that too, but you have to work a little bit quicker, and the lines are a little more crisper and harder to make fuzzy and blend them out. So I'm using Passionate Pink, and I'm just inking this stamp up. And I think I re-inked this last week, but I'm going to go ahead and just kind of stamp this off the edge a little bit. And look at where I am. There we go. And Cheryl, see how I'm smooshing a little bit? Because I really want to get a decent impression. And now I'm going to work a little faster. I'm just kind of working fast. I'm getting a little bit of water going here in the middle. And then I'm touching my brush to the edges of that heart. And you see how I'm not able to really make that edge fuzzy, but I'm going over that edge with my wet brush, and I'm making the Passionate Pink move just by adding water to the ink. Now, out of all of the watercolor techniques I've taught for paper crafting on this channel, and if you're just getting started out in watercolor, this is your least barrier to entry. Just do this. Stamp with your Gina K ink. Take a brush with some water and touch the edge of the line, and then use that color to paint with. Okay? And so we get that washy watercolor effect with our inks and our stamp, because remember, our stamps are still the star of the show. But look at the difference in the contrast. We stamp this one with watercolor paint. We stamp this one with our ink. I can still do a little bit of glazing, right? A little bit of layering. This time I've got that there. I'm just going to take this Passionate Pink. I've added some water, and I'm going to drop it in to the wet paper. And see how it swooshed? That's what I love about the Gina K inks. They swoosh like watercolor. Look, I'm going to add a little bit more right up here. They swoosh. And I think I don't know for sure, and I probably should ask Gina, but the Gina K inks have a drying agent in them that makes them smooth out really well when you're using them with your heavyweight cardstock, your white cardstock. So if you've ever noticed when you stamp with them, they smooth out really, really well. Just kind of touching up that little spot right there. And I think, I don't know for sure, that because I am using them wet, that's how we get that spider, that swooshing. I think that drying agent kind of helps that get that swooshy like effect, since I'm using the ink as watercolor. TJ said, I love a little bit of swooshing. I do too. All right, now let's go ahead and dry this up. Take a look at that. Look at how that's coming. Oh, I just love looking at it once it's really, really dry. Oh my goodness. Got a little God wink that just happened. Hi, Jenny. Jenny just popped in, catching it alive. Okay. So we can see a little bit of a difference. So we've got a smoothie, washy kind of look using the Gina K inks. Using our watercolor paint, we've got a little bit more texture in our heart. And right now, I want you to take a peek at right there in the white. See if anybody can see it. Tell me if you can see that heart just popping up right there. I love that. In our painting here. A little heart just kind of appeared. Let me know in the chat if you see it too. I see it. I see hearts all the time. They're little messages that are sent to us on the daily. I love it. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and start putting our card together and then begin to add our layers and our sentiment. And I love it. Let's do it. Okay, this is dry. Now it's a little bit, see how we worked with the water. It's a little buckled. That's okay. TJ said, I see it. Yay! I'm glad you see it. Check out this little cup. It's a little espresso cup. My daughter has an espresso machine, and I stole one of her cups. Yeah, Judith said she sees the heart. Okay, I've got some glue, some liquid glue. Yay! Everybody's seeing the heart. Oh, I love that. I've got some liquid glue. Lately, all of my liquid glues have been cloggy, and I've needed to really take some time to clean them out, and I just haven't taken any time. I use liquid glue mostly because today I grabbed my Tombow. I use liquid glue mostly because I use a lot of watercolor paper, and I really feel like it makes it stick. Mary just said, how cool is that? And everybody's saying they see it. Heidi's always finding hearts. I do too. That's like, there's science behind that. Looking for hearts in your daily life. I always know that they're a message from people who want to send a message to me, and there's several special people that have gone on that will send a message to me in that way. But I also believe that what you focus on appears. So look at that. And we've been talking about intention, about pausing, about really like focusing in on not having so much a cacophony of noise and things coming at you as far as your techniques go. And we just got that little message today telling me I'm on the right path. So I love that. Okay. TJ's just shared, I'm always afraid the glue will react with the paint on the other side. Nope, I've never had it do that. But if you do, you can always just paint some more, glaze over it, right? Okay, I've got a little bit of a boogery spot right here. I'm going to let it roll. And then we're going to just start to assemble our card. Now, keeping it simple. Here is the piece that we created together with the stencil. Let's take a look at how that's like really dried. Look at that. I just love that. Let me know in the chat if that technique was like, sometimes the most obvious techniques become the really, really amazing, give us the amazing looks, right? And I felt like this morning when I was thinking about it and I was like, I'm going to share this. I'm like, so obvious, but it is. Sometimes we overlook the obvious, like, oh, pouncing watercolor into a stencil and then just adding a little bit of water will give me that effect. Yeah, that seems obvious, but yeah, we don't always think about it. So Gloria just shared, oh, I'm backing up, Dawn. You have a beautiful attitude on life. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I try. It's a practice. It's an everyday practice on what you're going to do with your life and how I'm going to show up for you and be in service in that way. Crafting is meditative. Yes. Cheryl just, oh, Cheryl's talking. Oh, Ginny, so pretty. Okay. All right. So we've got these two hearts. Now we're going to nerd out a little bit more. Talk a little bit about design competition. Not competition. Design composition. So we've got these three hearts. And I'm going to layer. This is kind of going off the edge and it's breaking our shape. So we've got some visual interest happening already. And now what I'm going to do is layer this heart. I've got that bottom of the heart there, and I want to cover that up, and I'm going to layer this heart into it. So yeah, and I like that. I like the way that looks, creating a little bit of a connection between the three. However, we've got a lot of dimension going on here, right? But no height, like very, very little height. We've got the dimension and texture that's happening in the die cut heart that we created with the stencil. We've got some washy stencil-y look, and we also have some crisp shapes that are happening in here. Then we have this heart that we watercolored, and we've got a variation of color from light to dark. Then we have this heart that we watercolored with our inks, and it's a little bit more of a smoothie blend. So we have a lot of different visual interest things happening here. So it's giving us a lot of texture and dimension. Without the height, we see things coming forward, which is this heart, and some things going backward. And subliminally, and tell me if you see this, in my mind, this is what I'm seeing when I look at it. This heart is coming forward. Then the next heart that I see when I think about things in 3D is this heart. And then this heart is in the back. So, and really, we've just created that with shape and color and how we used it. So, woo! Mind blown. Big nerd out. Okay. All right, I've got the three little hearts that are easily lost, believe me, from that stamp set. And I'm going to add them onto the card just to create a little bit of extra embellishment. But first, before we do that, I'm going to add another heart. Heidi just said, definitely going to be trying this. Love the pretty color texture. Okay, we made these hearts, right? We've made all these different hearts, and they've got this, they've got our stenciled imagery on it because we cut them out. I want to use this, and I kind of want to bring it down here, or I might kind of come up here with it. I'm not sure. I might come up here with it. I want to use that heart. I might not use it at all, to be honest. I thought about putting it here and kind of creating a little bit of another design element, and I kind of like it now that I'm looking at it, but I'm using the white side of it. So remember, when that die cut cuts out, it cuts out two different parts of it. It cuts out the outer shape and the inner shape. I could use that. I want to create a little bit of a tone-on-tone look. I use the same paper. So we get another element of dimension and a little bit more texture. But we have, I'm messing around with where I want to put it. We have a little bit of this tone-on-tone look. And we've got a little bit of weight kind of happening down here with the card. I'm not so sure I'm going to keep it. I'm thinking about it. Like originally when I did the idea, I kind of liked this idea. But part of me is like, I kind of don't like this idea right now. And here's why. Because we talked about the level of texture and dimension that we created with these three hearts. And what came forward, then what came next, and then what came next. I'm going to leave it. So it makes me want to dive in with my sentiment first before I go into the hearts. So again, this is like week number 2. Last week, I kind of had this idea of where we were going with the design, and like midstream or right before the ending, I changed it and we didn't go that way. Isn't that kind of what happens when we're all sitting in our homes and sitting in our spaces with our supplies? We kind of change our mind on the fly. I'm going to take this sentiment, my heart is with you, and just kind of nest it up underneath this heart. Hopefully it'll be straight. Jeez, hard for me to tell. We'll see. I'm going rogue. And I'm just dropping it in. Who knows what that's going to look like. Oh, it came out right. It came out good. Dawn said, I think that the white shadow die cut disappears in the card. It does. It disappeared in this version of the card. In this card, it kind of disappeared and had a tone-on-tone look to it. In this card, I actually used the stamp and we die cut it. So I think it works really well there. And then I have this flower that kind of grounds the middle of it. This card's different. It just kind of has this organic look to it because of what we created with the stencil. So we're going to leave it be. And we're just going to use our hearts, our large, medium, and our small hearts to create some embellishments around it and go with it. I'm going to ink this up with the cherry red. So I'm going to use the cherry red and the passionate pink. And I think I'm going to come... Look at me, I'm playing around with this. I'm going to go over here. I do have that little watercolor boogery spot right there. My intuition just keeps bringing me down there to that corner. So I'm going to put that little heart down there. And then I'm going to come up here. And I know I talk about my intuition and trusting my gut. And I use that. I trust my gut all the time. Intuition in life. Now I'm inking this up with the passionate pink. I'm going to stamp it twice so that I get a dark version of the passionate pink and then another lighter version. And I think I'm going to go this way. And then I'm going to come up here and do that. And get that little tiny second iteration, second value of that color right there. And that's it. I love it. I love it. Part of me is like, should we splatter? No, we're not going to splatter. Jenny said, I love watching your creative process. Cover the woods with one honey. That's a great sentiment. Yeah. Okay. Love this. Loving the way this looks. Could add a few embellishments to it if we wanted to. But I'm not going to. Sometimes the simplest design looks the most complicated, right? It looks like, oh my gosh, we got 3 different watercolor techniques here. We don't. We've got a stencil technique and we have a painting technique with 2 different mediums. Painting and stamping. One with watercolor and one with ink. I'm loving it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And we are doing really good on time. That little blip, it's from my finger. I'm going to let it ride. I'm not even going to mess with it. Okay, friends. We had a ton of fun today. I hope I had a ton of fun. I hope you had a ton of fun. I really like the way this card came out. It was really different than the way I thought it was going to go, which I love that. I love that we're experimenting with things live together and we're learning together. I hope you really got a lot of value out of today's tutorial. I hope that this kind of format is really working for you for what you would like to learn from me. And the concept of me just kind of slowing us down a little bit and breaking things down a little bit more through the process of creating will work for you and is helpful for you. So everybody's saying that they love it and they had a ton of fun. I'm glad. And I hope that in doing so, in doing things this way, and if you've been watching me for a while, and many of you have, we've been kind of building up to this kind of style of teaching. I've been building up and kind of experimenting and trying different things, but I'm even simplifying it even more, and coming to that revelation just feels really good. Feels to be like the epitome of craft your joy. Like we're going to just kind of come into our space together, have a good intention to learn something together, but really break that one thing down into a technique that you feel like you can walk away and achieve, right? And without all the cacophony, without the overwhelm. And today we kind of covered 2 techniques. which is super fun. Okay, friends. Thank you, Lisa. Love the class. Everybody say it kind of was like a class. And that's kind of my approach here. We don't always talk about the anatomy of the card and that process of that part of the card making. We talk about the technique and we make a card as part of that process. Okay, friends, I'm sending you into the weekend to craft your joy. I hope you got a lot out of today's tutorial. Don't forget, if you're interested, all of the information about today's live, including the supplies, is listed down below in the description. You can, I would love to have you join my email list, my newsletter. I send out once a week, letting us know what we're going to be doing. Also, I give out a lot of freebies through there. And here's why I'm encouraging you to get on my email list. Social media is bonkers, right? I don't really know. I show up there. I always show up in the Gina K group and I share, and I will continue to share in that group. But as far as me sharing on my business page and sharing in my Instagram, I will continue to do that. But I have no clue if you're seeing it, right? The only thing I can control is how I show up here, how I show up in my newsletter, and also showing up more in my free community at Craft Your Joy Lab. And that's listed down below. I would love to see you over there. There's a lot of things that's growing, and there's a lot of things that I'm sharing over there that I'm not even sharing anywhere else. So, okay. Everybody loves learning and experimenting with me in a newer way. And that's kind of like my whole theme. Everybody's saying this works for them. My whole theme is experimentation. And that's why I created the Craft Your Joy Lab, because that's kind of what's happening over there too. All right, friends. Holy smokes. I will be back next week, next Thursday, same time, same bat channel, right? Except we're not going to make a card. We're going to do a paint along, friends. We are going to do a watercolor paint along, and I can focus on some more watercolor techniques. Except this one is going to be about brushes. And this is what many of you have asked me about. The difference between some different brushes and what you can achieve with them. And we're going to do a paint along. If you're on my email list, you're going to get the line art illustration of what I'm going to paint in the email. It'll be a free download. So I'd encourage you to get on my email list. You'll be able to print that out and you can paint along with me while we talk through things. So next week is going to be a lot more, even more chill, like calm. We're going to get into the flow. We're coming into the end of the month already. So let's paint along. Let's do a little painting together. Oh, everybody's saying thumbs up. Heidi said I'm entirely giving up on Facebook. I hear you, friend. I hear you. Okay, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Please consider all the subscribing and all the things and take a look at all the things down below in the description. And I'll see you next week. Bye now, friends.